Hi everyone, it's December 19th, 2020. So I want to share what I've learned about the Festival of Lights, Hanukkah, with you and how this relates to the United States, the position of the church today. Okay, so Hanukkah was a Jewish festival. It was a Jewish victory in the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire, the recapture of Jerusalem in the year 164 BC, and the rededicating of the second temple known as the Festival of Lights. So the festival was for 8 nights and days, starting on the 25th day of Kislev. Kislev is the third month of the civil year and ninth month of ecclesiastical year. That's the Christian church. The ecclesiastical means the Christian church on the Hebrew calendar. So it falls anywhere. Kislev is an autumn month, which occurs anywhere between November and December. Okay, so after the death of Alexander the Great, his kingdom was divided into four. If you remember, Alexander the Great, he was a conqueror. He was a worshiper of many gods, and he conquered by malicious violence. At the end of his life, he went insane, and he thought he was born not of his earthly father, but of Zeus, a false god. Okay, God spoke to me and told me he was a backslider. Okay, so Alexander the Great conquered many lands, and he was one of the groups of the Seleucid empires. He gained dominance over Judea, and he wanted to enforce a dominion over Egypt and the Jews. Okay, a dominion is a ruling or controlling power. Okay, so I do believe Alexander the Great was called to be a soldier, the conqueror of these lands. However, he actually fell out and backslid, and we know what happened to him. He went out of this world thinking a false belief, unfortunately. Okay, so the back to the Seleucid Empire gaining dominance over Judea and where they originated from. Okay, so we know the Seleucid Empire tolerated a totally different religion, such as Olympianism and Babylonian religion, Zoroastrianism and Buddhism. Now, just think of this again. The Jews are in another land with the worship of the Babylonian god Marduk. Marduk worship is the same as Baal worship. That is another name for him. The same Baal the people worshipped at the Tower of Babel in the book of Genesis. See, the Jews had a history of being overtaken by Babylon. When the Jews failed to stop worship of Baal and Ashtoreth, they would be given over to their sin when they denied Christ. And that we know happened also in 585 BC when Ezekiel the prophet preached to Judah and Israel, and Jeremiah 626 BC. So it's happening here, but it's happening a different way. This is when they're worshiping Marduk. And this is because of the institution of the Seleucid Empire, and how it got conquered was Alexander the Great. He conquered these lands, and one of the groups was the Seleucid Empire that housed the Jews. Okay, so we know that much now. The worship of Baal included sacrifice of babies and children in the valley of Gehenna, and unholy homosexual and bisexual, heterosexual promiscuity after the sacrifice, also drunkenness. So basically they would sacrifice their children and babies, and then they would have these wild sex orgies, homosexual, anything goes. And so the Jews are in a land again with Baal worship, which was part of the Olympianism, Babylonian religion, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Zoroastrians believe in worship of one God. They call Abrahu Mazda as the highest and supreme God. And they believe in polytheism as well as animal and human sacrifice. The Seleucid Empire, just before the Maccabean revolt in 167 BC, also had a wide Hellenistic culture combining Greek culture and indigenous groups. Now, the Greek culture allowed worship of false gods such as Zeus and Athena and offering up ritualistic gifts to the dead called libation, celebrating the dead. And then indigenous peoples worshiping nature and the creation with no connection to God, but rather nature. See, God says when discipling these people, nurture them, because they exist now. They worship Mother Earth. That's where this originated. By these indigenous people worshiping the creation and more than the creator, not knowing, having a personal relationship with him. Now, at this time in creation, 167 BC, the teachings of Moses, which were written between 1250 BC, existed, and they had the teachings. The Maccabees were a group of Jewish warriors who revolted against the Seleucid Empire, which was full of idolatry. The Maccabees were followers of and worshippers of Jehovah, the true God, and they fought for religious freedom to end. Okay, the oppression of the Seleucid, the Maccabees believed in keeping covenant with God. Now, I'm speaking of the Mosaic covenant, which includes the law in Exodus 20, the 10 commandments, and God goes over a number of instructions from Exodus 20 to Exodus 24, including if one kills a man, then he should be put to death. And it commands justice. These are some really good laws and information between those lines. Okay, between lines, Exodus, Old Testament 20 and 24. God states to me, this is supposed to be format for a government, a governing body. See, the revolt happened, the Maccabee revolt happened because the Seleucid Empire became under rule of Antiochus III, whom wanted to remove Judaism, and he made ways to defile the Jews by setting up traps, such as when he built a gymnasium outside of the Jewish people's temple, and he stated anyone wanting to go into the gymnasium must be naked. This was the idea of Hellenistic masculinity. However, in the Jewish culture, this violated the Mosaic covenant. Another Nebuchadnezzar, looks like he's another one. Remember when the Jews were also in captivity around 586 BC, and Nebuchadnezzar overtook them and made all bow down to him, except for 3 that were saved from that, and we know they were Daniel, Belshazzar, and Abednego. Okay, so don't bow down to the world or Babylon. Okay, that's our lesson. But anyway, so this man, Antiochus III, he put up altars to Greek gods and idols in every town, and those that did not worship and pray to them were put to death. See, this king was very vain, and he took a bribe, and he wanted to have his name in the textbooks and the history books, even if that meant being evil and ruthless and giving his soul over to the god of this world, Baal, which is Satan. And he wanted to distinguish himself above all others. Pride. Okay. So his predecessors, that's what his goal was. He forcefully converted the people to Hellenistic culture, to worship false gods. He used force. He plundered the Jewish temple and erected an idol on it. Anyone that didn't pray to them and convert was put to death, and all this, the tensions arose. the tensions arose in that land in Seleucid, there the empire. One man's action, a priest named Matthias, whom refused to sacrifice to an idol, caused a revolt because the tensions were arising. They had done many things, this wicked king. Okay, so when this brave Jewish man refused to sacrifice, his name being Mattathias, he was led out all the people to flee to the hills. The ones that were seeking to stay in covenant are the ones that went with Matthias. Okay, so they were seeking to stay in the covenant with God, the Mosaic covenant at that time, and many did in a kind of an exodus. Okay, so they were let out. They were pursued by the king. Some were overtaken. However, that didn't stop the rest of them. But they united with the group of Hasidians, mighty warriors of Israel, who offered to help. See, God's power worked. So when they went up to the hills, they met with this group, either Hasidians or Hasidians, and they supported the law of God as well. These people supported the covenant, the Ten Commandments, and worshiped Jehovah as well. So the Maccabees' son led the group into victory as they conquered Judah and destroyed the ungodly out of the land, and they turned God's wrath from Israel. They conquered all of Judah and they set Palestine free of the Seleucid Empire. Now they went on to conquer lands all over the world. By this victory, they gained independence and they gained power and they gained strength to go conquering. Okay, so that's how this began. I believe this is what the American church needs to do right now in America. This is what God has shown me. We are in a spiritual warfare. We are living in Babylon, and Babylon is overcoming some of us, okay, by the drugs, by sexual immorality, by forcing paganistic ways like the worship of LGBTQ. If you go to those pride parades, even if you go to church and they have the rainbow sign, that's dishonoring God. However, if you bow down and pray, God will forgive you. So in our hearts, we are born again. We are spiritual Jerusalem. Now we're Gentiles. Most of us are adopted in. We're not actual Jews, but we have a responsibility to fight for our freedom from these oppressors in our government, schools, and businesses. They've taken the bribe. Actually, many in our government have taken the bribe today. And I want us to read to you and show you the Declaration of Independence. Now, Thomas Jefferson wrote that when, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So what he is saying is that when the laws of the land go against the laws of God and the laws of nature, it is our job, it is the people's right to impel a separation of powers. That is exactly what we have in America. We have given rights to the enemy in America by this government who does all kinds of crimes and corruption and who shows no remorse. The enemy has rights, and we need a separation of powers, and heaven is involved here. So what we as the body of Christ need to do is revolt, and we need to form militias and contact each other. And so we will find each other by the Spirit of God. And then Thomas Jefferson goes on to say, We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form. And so what he's actually saying is that it is our duty, it is our right as people of God, that when the government is destructive of us and our family and our generations, it is our right, it is our duty